At this time, I'd like to invite us into a breath together. You know, before pursuing a career in the ministry, I was actually a middle school math teacher. And if there are any teachers or former teachers who are with us today, I know that I do not need to say this for you. But for those of us who may not know, the first year of teaching is brutal. It's brutal. I don't know, it just is for so many reasons. And my first year was no different. I taught at a startup charter school in a city in New Jersey. And if I'm honest, every day just felt like a new chaos that I could not have predicted. Some of my most vivid memories are actually of the mornings before school. I always made it a point to get to the building way before the start of the school day. I knew that once students started arriving for breakfast, the day would just feel like an avalanche of student needs and administrative needs and unexpected problems and new challenges and heartaches and struggles. So I got there early in order to prepare, in order to brace myself for that avalanche, in order to batten down the hatches of my classroom, if you will. It was always me and our beloved school custodian, Felix, who would enter in the darkness of the early morning, and it was us who turned on the first lights in the building together. Now, this might sound silly, but what I remember mostly doing during those early mornings was sharpening pencils, just sharpening pencils. You see, if I had enough sharpened pencils on hand, I would be ready when a student said that they forgot their pencil or that their pencil broke, or I would be ready to intercept the student who wanted to use a trip to the pencil sharpener as a chance to chat with his friend across the room instead of working on his lesson. Or I would be ready for when a student wanted to see what would happen if you stuff enough drinking straws into an electric pencil sharpener. Spoiler alert, the pencil sharpener breaks. I loved my students, but middle school is tough and confusing for kids. It's a tough age. And I struggled to manage my classroom and to teach a successful lesson. Sharpening pencils was at least one thing that I could do to avoid problems. So that's what I did. I sharpened pencils almost as if they were like little swords to ward off whatever crises were to come that day. It was my way of battening down the hatches for the avalanche. Almost every morning, Felix would come to my classroom and interrupt my pencil sharpening just to let me know that the sun was rising. He would always insist that I come to these big floor to ceiling windows that we had in the hallway of our school. And he would be saying, Peters, this is the most beautiful sunrise. You can't miss it. He said that about all the sunrises. And I would come to the windows with him, mostly just to appease him. But as Felix gazed with wonder out at the sky, I would stand there impatiently, just thinking about everything that I felt like I should be doing in my classroom in that moment. Thinking about all those pencils that I should be sharpening. American psychologist and author and Buddhist practitioner, Tara Brach. She explains that when we are in times of stress and trying to anticipate what's around the corner, it's so easy for so many of us to slip into what she calls over controller mode. It's that impulse in us that is preoccupied with human doing rather than human being. The over-controller is preoccupied with all the pencils that should be sharpened, and it keeps her from experiencing the sunrise. My obsession with trying to do things to prepare, it didn't make me a good teacher. It didn't help me handle anything. Honestly, it fed my stress, it exhausted me, and the kicker is that no matter how many pencils I sharpened, that avalanche still came and I still didn't feel able to handle it. The unexpected stuff still felt unexpected. The hard stuff still felt hard. And the scary stuff still felt scary. Tara Brach elaborates a bit about the overcontroller, saying that the result of regular overdoing is chronic fatigue, even exhaustion. There's no room to breathe, no rest. We lose access to our own creativity and natural intelligence. We can't feel our own loneliness or sadness or yearning because the over-controller is not living in the present moment. Now, I'll add that it's not so easy to just let go of this over-controller impulse. So much of our responses to stress are so ingrained in us from our past and perhaps from past traumas. So it's important that we show ourselves compassion when it comes to this stuff. And sometimes jumping right into the doing might just be the thing that gets us through the day. And that's okay. But I've been thinking a lot about this over controller in us lately. This past year has been its own series of avalanches, right? It's so easy for us to look for some sort of solid ground, something to brace ourselves, to look for some pencils that we can sharpen, some way to batten down the hatches in anticipation for whatever might be around the corner. But resilience does not actually rely on preparation. It's often in spite of events we could not have seen coming that we end up showing resilience. And in our reading this morning, Mark Nepo points out that too much focus on preparation for what's to come can ironically stand in the way of our ability to take on whatever it is that does come, whether it's bad or good, rather than steadying us on solid ground. Our desire to be ready for the future will always work against us if it keeps us from being able to meet the present moment. If it keeps us from taking care of our hearts and our spirits right now. If it serves as a placeholder for feeling those tough feelings that arise in us, feelings that need to be experienced and felt and metabolized in us in order for us to be able to move forward and to do things with clarity and purpose. A few weeks ago, our country survived an attempted coup. A terrorist attack on our capital at the hands of a large group of white American citizens. It's so natural for us to worry about what that means for what's ahead. That pit in our stomachs, right? Reminding us that this wasn't an isolated incident. The panicked search for some solid ground. What comes next? What should we all expect in the coming months? What can we do? I invite us to pause, to breathe, and to honor those feelings that are coming up in us. Because what happened at the Capitol that day was scary. I can't speak for you, but I know that I've been feeling confusion and anger and fear among a whole tangle of other feelings, feelings that I probably have yet to even uncover. And then this past week, I did find myself feeling some relief, some hope. But I know that those other tough feelings are still there too. You know, seeing the word terrorist so much after the attacks on the Capitol, it actually has me thinking quite a bit back to 9/11. After the World Trade Center attacks that day, our country's leaders responded right away by going to war. We weren't given a chance to truly pause and grieve together as a nation, to process our devastation and our fears together in community, to breathe and regroup so that we could move forward with clarity and purpose. Instead, the doer came out, the over controller. And so our country sharpened its pencils and battened down its hatches, preparing a show of force toward an entire part of the world, entire races of people. A clumsy response that distracted our nation from all of the grief and fear and devastation. In her book, See No Stranger, A Memoir and Manifesto of Revolutionary Love, Sikh activist and civil rights lawyer Valerie Kaur draws a very clear thread from that moment after 9/11 to the poisonous displays of white nationalism that we've seen blooming in recent years. The same white nationalism that was on display assaulting our capital only very recently. Because trauma that goes ignored, pain and anxiety that does not get honored and felt and metabolized can linger and fester and grow and spill out in devastating ways. So then, how do we prepare ourselves to meet whatever unexpected things may happen in the future? Well, we breathe and we sit with feelings that come up in us. We tend to those feelings, the bad and the good, the grief and the joy, the fear and the hope. We take care of our hearts and our spirits and the hearts and spirits of our communities. We hold each other. We make our way forward with clarity and with purpose. And we learn to trust our own resilience, come what may. May it be so, and amen.